A centurion, also hekatontarch in Greek sources, or, in Middle Byzantine times, kentarch, was a professional officer of the Roman army after the Marian reforms of 107 BC. Most centurions commanded 80 men, but senior centurions commanded cohorts, or took senior staff roles in their legion. Centurions were also found in the Roman navy. Centuries, or centuriae, means tribe or company. Theoretically, this word traces its roots to centum, which is Latin for 100, but that connection is widely disputed or disregarded. Role. In the Roman infantry, centurions initially commanded a centuria or century. Centuries, or centuriae, developed from the Roman tribal system under the Servian reforms and could contain 200 to 1,000 men. Later, generals and Caesars further manipulated these numbers with double and half-strength units. Julius Caesar, for instance, made the first century double strength. Centurions seem to receive a much higher rate of pay than the average legionary, twice as much or more. Veteran legionaries often worked as tenants of their former centurions. During the imperial era, centurions gradually rose in seniority in their cohort, commanding centuries with higher precedence, until commanding the senior century and therefore the whole cohort. The very best centurions were then promoted to become centurions in the first cohort, called Meaudians, commanding one of the 10 centuries and also taking on a staff role. The most senior centurion of the legion was the primus Pilus, who commanded the first century. All centurions, however senior, had their own allocated century. There was little difference between the ranks of centurions except for the primus Pilus. The primus Pilus also participated in war councils. The primus Pilus was so called because his own century was the first file of the first cohort. Only 8 officers in a fully officered legion outranked the primus Pilus, the legate, commanding the legion. The senior tribune, second in command of the legion. The camp prefect. And the 5 other tribunes, who apparently served as senior staff officers to the legate with a rank roughly equivalent to a modern colonel. Comparisons between the centurion grades and modern officer ranks can lead to many incorrect assumptions. Centurions could be elected, appointed by the Senate, or promoted from the ranks for a variety of reasons. Julius Caesar is said to have promoted his centurions for displays of valor. Other historians cite examples of them being the first over the enemy's wall or through the breach. If this case was strictly so, then there would be a lack of centurions in peacetime garrisons, which is where the Roman army mostly spent its time. Nonetheless, although not directly comparable to modern ranks, the various centurion grades may be loosely compared to modern junior and middle officer grades. Centurions often suffered heavy casualties in battle, generally fighting alongside the legionaries they commanded. They usually led from the front, occupying a position at the front right of the century formation. They could be identified by the transverse horsehair crest on top of their helmet, their metal greaves and the sword worn on the left, like all Roman officers. They led and inspired their men by example. They also sought to display the skill and courage that may have brought them to their rank in the first place. It is for these reasons that they often suffered a disproportionate number of casualties. Below the centurions were the options, seconds in command of centuries. Being held personally responsible for the training and discipline of the legionaries under their command, centurions had a well-deserved reputation for dealing out harsh punishment. In the Annals, Tacitus tells the story of one known as Cedo Alterum, which roughly translates to "Gimme another." The mutinous soldiers thrust out the tribunes and the camp prefect. He plundered the baggage of the fugitives, and then killed a centurion, Lucilius, to whom, with soldiers' humor, they had given the nickname "Gimme another," because when he had broken one vine stick across a soldier's back, he would call in a loud voice for another. And another. The vine stick mentioned above by Tacitus was called a vitus. It was a symbol of the centurion's authority and the implement with which he would mete out punishment. Evidence suggests that centurions had important social status and held powerful positions in society. They seem to have received their status according to their rank. On retirement they could be eligible for employment as lictors. Seniority, Each century had a precedence within the cohort. Centurions' seniority within the cohort and legion depended on the position within the legion of the century they were in charge of, which often took their name from their centurion. Centurions began by leading junior centuries before being promoted to leading a more senior one. Promotion usually came with experience, or at least length of service, but many still never made it as far as leading a first cohort. Yet for centurions who showed, say, particularly conspicuous bravery during battle, there was the opportunity to be promoted several grades at once. For example, Julius Caesar's reward for a centurion who had greatly pleased him was to advance him 8 grades. Promotion through the various grades often meant transferring to another legion. The precedence during the times of the Manipular Legion, commanding 60 men, was organized like this: hastati 10 junior and 10 senior, principes 10 junior and 10 senior, tra 5 junior and 5 senior. For the Imperial Legion they were organized. First cohort, second cohort, third cohort, and so on. There were 5 centuries in the first cohort, each century with twice the number of soldiers of a normal century. All first cohort centurions outranked all centurions from other cohorts. The qualities necessary for the centurion: centurions had to be literate, have connections, be at least 30 years of age, and had already served a few years in the military. The centurion in the infantry is chosen for his size, strength and dexterity in throwing his missile weapons and for his skill in the use of his sword and shield. In short, for his expertness in all the exercises. He is to be vigilant, temperate, active and readier to execute the orders he receives than to talk. Strict in exercising and keeping up proper discipline among his soldiers, in obliging them to appear clean and well dressed and to have their arms constantly rubbed and bright. See also: Centurions. Agathias, Alexander of Bergamo, Aulus Pudens, Cassius Chaerea, Cornelius the Centurion, Gaius Crastinus, Gordius, Saint Longinus, Lucius Artorius Castus, Lucius Vorenus, Marcellus the Centurion, Petronius, Sempronius Densus, Spurius Ligustinus, Titus Pullo. The use, related, list of Roman army unit types, military establishment of the Roman Empire, evocatus, related Roman rank, praefectus castrorum. References. External links: the dictionary definition of centurion at Wiktionary.